So let's jump into taming the teenager. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, teenagers scare the living daylights out of me. Nelson Mandela says, the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. This is the motto for teenage life. You're going to be okay, darling, but you're going to fall. And if you fall 10 times, just make sure you get up 11. Okay, it's very difficult being a teenager. What is adolescence? Adolescence is the period following the onset of puberty. Now, let me shock you, maybe not, maybe you know this. Puberty is beginning younger and younger. So girls at the age of 9, 10 are beginning to have their first menstrual cycle. And that releases the hormones. And so we have adolescence at a very young age. This is because of the chemicals in our food, and also because we eat so much better than we used to in the long ago. So what is adolescence? From puberty to 19, 20 years of age. I would say in the modern age, puberty is from about 11 and a half, guys. Sorry for that, but yep. Lots of physical changes happen, such as hormonal development. Now, it's important to note executive functioning in the brain. This is memory, impulse control, judgment, self-concept. It's the last to develop. So before you think that teenagers are horrible little things, or they're not listening to you, or they're doing ridiculously stupid things like taking drugs and drinking and getting pregnant, please bear in mind, they don't have your brain. Their brain is developing, okay? You have to mediate. As Dorothy said, you are the one who has to tell them which way to go. They're not going to know. How will they know? They don't have the brain to know. The great thing is that neuroplasticity is around, and that means our brain is plastic. It can grow, it can develop, and those things that are used most will stay. Those networks we use most in the brain will stay, and those we don't use will disappear. So a good environment will lead to good brain development, and a traumatic environment leads to potential problems. Now, I'll give you a little vignette from my journeys. I went to a school in an area which is known for very significant drug and gangster activity. And at the school, I was in a grade 6 class, and at the teacher's desk, there was more Ritalin, which is a drug, methylphenidate, used in attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder for focus. It's basically pharmaceutical grade cocaine, and it is very, very good for children with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder to get them to focus, but it has blunting effects on their emotion. There was so much Ritalin on this desk. I said to the teacher, how is this possible? Because there are only 5% incidence of ADHD in the entire world. You can't have like 15 kids in your class with ADHD. No, she said she does. So I sat with the class for a while and I talked to them. It turned out that a number of the children were suffering severe trauma. They didn't even know they were suffering trauma. They had heard gunshots, they had seen stabbings. Now, let me tell you something. The same signs and symptoms that characterize ADHD characterize a brain that is traumatized. So a child who is traumatized will have hyperattentivity. They're always on edge. They're looking for everything because they could be stabbed next. They will have very little focus. They will be very fidgety because they're anxious. They don't have ADHD. They are neurotypical, not neurodiverse. But trauma makes them act that way. So we need to bear in mind that the kids we are dealing with, the students we are dealing with, may sometimes appear neurodiverse and in fact be neurotypical. Now, this is just to tell you a little bit about the hormones. Remember, biology, testosterone released in the man, estrogen released in the woman. And of course, these hormones make the brain go, well, quite excitable. So what does this mean? Well, what it means, the fact that their brain is not properly developed means that risky behavior is biological and evolutionary. It's normal. So teenagers will act on risky behaviors. They will want immediate gratification. They can't wait. Their brain's not developed to wait, okay? They sleep longer in the morning. They aren't lazy, but their melatonin is produced later at night than a younger child. So their sleep drug, if you like it, to call it that, kicks in later. So it's very difficult for them to wake up for school. I believe teenagers should start school at 11 o'clock in the day, not at 8 o'clock. They appear self-centered, but they're not. This is just because they are still developing. They don't know exactly who they are yet. And the ability to control their impulses is seriously inhibited. But what does this mean to you? Well, actually, it's an excellent opportunity to teach them. Because remember, the brain is plastic. You can teach it. You can teach them about risk-taking behavior. You can tell them what risks there are, how to control themselves, how to spot danger, and you can tell them about peer pressure. They're totally normally clever. They just aren't able to inhibit themselves and know the consequences of their actions. So you put those boundaries in and they will respond. So I just want to give you an example of now alcohol is a problem we have, and as Dylan was saying, he deals with FASD. Well, Dylan, this is the kind of brain that you'd be looking at here. So there's a non-drinker, so you can see the temporal lobes perfect. You can see there's occipital lobes working. You can see there's firing in the cortex and the neocortex. Eish, look at this one. This one is a heavy drinker. Yo, wow. Okay, not much happening there. Okay, that brain is in real trouble. Okay, so this is what we need to know when we are dealing with teenagers who may be on drugs. Same picture basically for drugs and alcohol abuse. Their brain is I mean, if you even look at the cortical areas, if you see here, on the left-hand side, the non-drinker, he's got quite a few little squiggles in his brain. You know, there's lots of squiggly bits, and the other brain, the heavy drinker, the middle bits of his brain are in fact completely, there's no cortex, there's no neocortex there. So thought is going to be very difficult for him. So we did look at this earlier. So the adolescent brain is developing and is not yet developed. So managing teenage behavior. How do you work with a teen? Now, remember I said to you boundaries. Decide what the boundaries are and stick to them. Very difficult, yes, because, you know, when they have a temper tantrum or when they throw things at you or they threaten you, you want to back down. But honestly, stick to your boundaries. Get them to agree on the boundary with you. They may object to these, but actually, boundaries are a sign of love and care. Listen to them. This is what Kathy said. Listen and don't interrupt them. Listen until they have finished. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to listen to a teenager. Very few of us listen. We butt in and we tell them because they ramble. Allow them to learn from their own mistakes as long as they are safe, and accept that they might do things differently. So if they refuse to learn for an exam, allow them to fail. Okay, hard, allow them to, and then help them to succeed. Don't bottle up your concerns. If you're worried about a teenager, you're worried they're having unprotected sex or using drugs, talk to them and give them useful information. It is not useful to say to a teenager, don't do drugs, don't have sex, because they don't have the ability cognitively to put off gratification. You need to give them ways to gratify themselves that are not dangerous. So what gives you the same effect as a drug? Sports, interestingly enough. Sports heighten your serotonin and makes you very happy. What things can they do instead of doing dangerous things? It's controversial, but I am going to say it. Instead of having unprotected sex, we should tell children about masturbation. They're not going to grow hair on their hands, and they're not going to get pregnant if they are able to explore sexuality without actually having to have sex. Remember, their body is developing. They are becoming sexual beings. You can't pretend they're not. Allow them to have their own space and privacy. This is also a contentious one. Why should they have privacy when they are your child, for example? Well, because they're human, they deserve respect. If they give you cause to think that they are not deserving of privacy, then you negotiate with them around looking at their phone or looking at their iPad or whatever. So if you fear for their safety, then you must break that rule. Now, the thing about a teenager is that because their hormones are being released and a number of chemicals are running through their brain, they are often stressed, anxious, and even depressed, okay? Suicide rates go up, particularly amongst young teenage boys in teenager years. So how do you know if they are stressed, anxious, or depressed? They're eating too much, eating too little, changing in their sleep patterns, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, lethargy, generally just having no motivation or energy to do anything, isolating from friends and family, and expressions of helplessness. I've really tried to do this and I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't play this. I can't do hockey. I can't do maths. Okay, expressions of helplessness, we really need to respond to positively. So what is anxiety? And, people, funnily enough, adults experience anxiety and are not sure what it is. I had an instance of a client who had what she thought was gastro, and it was anxiety. She thought her stomach was upset because of gastro, and it was actually anxiety. So particularly with children, it's quite easy to tell when they're anxious because they have stomach aches, problems sleeping, restless and fidgety. They become more clingy, struggle to focus, get upset more quickly, and express negative thoughts and worries. It is biologically unusual, very unusual, for a teenager or a young adolescent to have a stomach ache or a headache without something being wrong with them. Okay, if there's no, if they don't have an ulcer or a brain tumor or whatever, they shouldn't have sore stomachs and sore heads. That's anxiety. How can you cope with anxiety? Okay, so there are a couple of tips here. Focus on something less anxiety provoking, listen to music, stop and breathe. I'm going to give you a breathing exercise. Breathing is profoundly, profoundly useful in dealing with anxiety. I have literally seen someone come from a state of utter panic attack to calm, almost falling asleep just through breathing. Focus on what you can change. Focus on what is within your control. You know, even for us as adults, we like to project into the future. We like to think about, you know, what will happen if X, Y, and Z. What are you in control of? In your whole life, what are you in control of? Your own actions. That's it. Okay. I had dinner with a colleague a while ago who was utterly terrified about the state of the rand and the state of electricity. You know what? You can't control that. You need to calm the farm. Okay. You can control your actions to it. If you are worried that the rand is dropping, if you are worried about the lack of electricity, then you must do something with your own actions to change that. Buy an inverter, move overseas if you want to, I don't know. Okay, how can you help someone with anxiety? Validate their feelings, set limitations, provide resources, most importantly, suggest deep breathing. So this is something that I would encourage you to do with yourself, but also with your teenagers that you deal with. So this is a breathing exercise. So the first thing is you sit cross-legged, or you can sit on your chair, legs down, not crossed. Put the tip of the tongue at the back of your front teeth. Before we start, lift your shoulders up to your ears and then just let them drop. Whoosh. And now, breathe out through the mouth, making a whooshing sound. Close the mouth and count to 4 while breathing in. Count to 7, holding the breath. Count to 8, breathing out, making a whooshing sound. Whoosh. It seems plonky and, you know, new agey, but this really does work. So I would encourage you to, these slides will be available to Zoe, so I encourage you to ask her to give them to you. Depression is on the continuum with anxiety. I will tell you that the worst diseases I have seen are terminal cancer, depression, and anxiety. Yeah, and motor neuron disease. I think those are the 4 hectic diseases that I wouldn't want to have. Depression and anxiety are becoming absolutely normal. At where I work, the students are so stressed that the incidence is about 1 in 3 having episodes of anxiety and depression. That's alarming, people. I've seen 9-year-olds who need to be on anxiolytics, 9-year-olds who are so anxious that they need drug therapy. Terrifying. So what causes depression? Drugs can cause depression. Stress. Female sex hormones. So when you're dealing with teenage girls, know that, you know, estrogen, testosterone, these things can really cause an imbalance in how you're feeling. Poor nutrition, brain chemistry imbalance, genetics and biology, traumatic events. Now, if you think about what you are dealing with, you're dealing with children who may very well have poor nutrition, definitely stress, definitely traumatic events. Okay, they are more likely to be depressed than not. Okay, so let us not judge. Let us reach out and assist. Stress is like Pac-Man. I don't know if you remember the game from the 80s with that little yellow round circle goes around, chomp, 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 chomping, and chomps ghosts and stuff. Stress is like Pac-Man. It chomps all our happy juice. And once your happy juice is gone, it's gone. It doesn't rejuvenate unless you take drug therapy. Okay, so common depression treatments are psychotherapy. I find that this is a useful for low-level anxiety and depression. Severe depression or severe anxiety, I think drug therapy medication is incredibly useful. Please don't judge anybody who is on drug therapy. Drug therapy is incredibly useful. I've seen it bring people back from suicide. Mind-body medicine. So research shows that changing your lifestyle, exercising and doing meditation and breathing can in fact lower levels of depression. What if I told you that if you ran 20 minutes 5 times a week, so ran enough so that your heart was actually beating and you sweated, it's as effective as taking something like old time, what we used to call Prozac, which is the modern version would probably be something like escitalopram. So, you know, exercise, taking care of yourself is as good as drug therapy. Something to share with your students. Brain stimulation. Some people with treatment-resistant depression try electroconvulsive therapy. Now, I used to think ECT, before I was properly trained, I used to think ECT was absolutely horrifying. How could you shock someone's brain? But I've had a client who had ECT because they had drug-resistant they were drug-resistant depression, and it actually saved their life. It changed them. And so, but I will also tell you that we're not exactly sure how brain stimulation works, which worries me a bit. And underlying everything is self-esteem in teenagers. Teenagers don't have this in buckets, by the way. They don't have very positive self-concepts because they're not sure who they are yet. So to inculcate self-esteem, you know, to build it, focus on the positive thoughts, focus on what's positive about them. Remember that failure is the route to success. I'm not saying fail them and let them fail, fail, fail. I'm saying let them fall and help them to rise. Whenever a negative thought comes to you, change it. Okay, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm fat, or I've got so many pimples, try another thing. Try something like, I really like my hair, or I really have nice hands. Don't compare yourself to others. This is a huge one. As teenagers, they compare themselves to everybody. They compare themselves to their friends all the time. Comparisons are absolutely useless. You will be better than some people and worse than others. That's it. So you're either going to get big-headed or you're going to feel bad. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. If you have done something that is remarkably good today, well, do the same tomorrow, only better. Validate yourself. Positive self-talk is useful. It is useful to get teenagers to articulate something they love about themselves. Okay, so if you're doing a task or an activity, you might want to just sit in a circle, and each person tells one thing that they like about themselves and the person next to them. Okay,